Maxwell Hare, John Kingsman, convicted of UES brawl with Antifa. Gavin was there speaking. Antifa came to shut it down. We've seen all the footage. Antifa attacks them. But for the crime of fighting back against the meth heads, well, they'd been convicted. They'd been railroaded. Now they're going to go to prison. Gavin McInnes, thanks for coming on, my friend.
The narrative is that these Proud Boys are roaming the streets like gorillas, just looking for someone to pound.
The opposite is always true. You know what I mean? Like they say, we're anti-fascists, right? And we're against the government, and we're going to go fight these fascists. Because they're Nazis, because they're full of hate. And you go, okay, that sounds good to me. Fight some Nazis, that sounds great. But what really happened? The Antifa is the paramilitary wing of the DNC. They are the government. They are the establishment. And they say, okay, go attack these Trump supporters, call them Nazis or whatever you have to do, and we'll let you get away with it scot-free. So they assault everyone, no problems for Antifa. Somehow they magically get lawyers, no media attention at all for the Antifa that attacked that guy. And then they take this alleged Nazis, the Trump supporters, and charge them with 15 years. I mean, they haven't been sentenced yet, but they're facing 15 years for defending themselves against a mob. So the fascists, the tyranny, is the left in this case. And the patriots, the guys supporting the president, they're like anarchists. They're the ones being treated like Guy Fawkes. And I think because we're intellectually lazy, we're mentally obese these days, that we're easy prey for these propagandists who just make up basically any story they want. They vilify anyone they want, and it works. And it doesn't just work in the court of public opinion, it works in actual criminal court. We just keep fighting. You know, we've been through worse. We've been through the Civil War. We've been through the American Revolution. We've been through Vietnam, totally polarized America, and we fought through that. And truth, the pendulum swings both ways, and I think truth is on its way back. These propagandists have no plan. They say no border, no wall, no USA at all. And I even heard a chant the other day that said, from Palestine to Mexico, all the walls have got to go. So they don't want any borders at all in the entire world. An idea like that, much like fascism, by the way, can't gain any serious traction. The Nazis couldn't have lasted, and these people won't last, because tyrannical orthodoxy, tyranny doesn't last. Freedom lasts.
Finish him.
Antifa!
Flawless victory. If you are receiving this transmission, you are the resistance.
Trying to think of the best way to cover this as we are back live here on the Infowars.com War Room, brought to you by InfowarsStore.com. With me from Infowars Europe, I'm trying to figure the best way to cover this because there's so many issues here, and it's just a confluence of issues. It's a linear pattern that you can follow. But what's happening in Belgium is just an example of what is to come to Europe. And see, I'm just a guy that asks questions in a linear fashion to try to figure out the root cause of an issue. So you can say, well, why are all these Muslims going to Europe? What the hell's going on? Well, again, there's a confluence of issues there. But let's just focus on what's happening in Belgium and realize that we don't want this to come to America, and we don't want Muslims migrating to other secular nations and then dominating it politically through their religious ideology. Here is a video, the RT covering the Muslim Party in Belgium is now campaigning to establish an Islamic state in their new region.
They should be in favor of equality of men and women in favor of the rule of law, freedom of expression. And when we see that people don't accept this and are going to be candidates in elections, well, I think there's a big problem. There's also a big problem with the fact that people who don't even have our nationality are allowed to vote for local elections in Belgium. And I think this should change. And first of all, also, we should put a stop to this mass immigration of people coming from outside Europe and from mainly Islamic countries, people who cannot and will not adapt to our way of living in West.
So again, that's an RT report, and again, the story is how Muslims in Belgium are trying to take over the government and establish Islamic law. Now, Dan, you've got the story, top City Hall to call for an end of Islamic occupation. So what's happening in Belgium right now where they're trying to make Islam the political force that it has been in Muslim nations, but you have some, it appears, standing up to this, saying we're not going to fall to an Islamic occupation.
Right. In many of these Belgian cities now at this point, the Islamic population could range anywhere from 15 to 25%, depending on the city and depending on how the numbers are counted. This politician in particular, Philip de Winters of the populist nationalist Vlaams Belang party, that they basically are from the Flemish region of Belgium, and they are advocating for national sovereignty. Even in some cases, they'd like to see Flanders return to the Flemish people and to break away from Belgium in some cases. But I can't speak for de Winter on that case. But anyways, he did climb to the top of City Hall in Antwerp. And he gave basically a viral video that he recorded there and was just explaining briefly the history of the city, its relationship to freedom in general, a history of wars and things that the city has survived all throughout for decades, centuries now at this point. And the City Hall has been up since the 1500s. And he basically said that the City Hall is kind of a symbol of freedom that has stood throughout all of this turmoil and occupations by different nations, different cultures. And he said now the city is being occupied by Islamists, and he estimated that about 25% of the city is Islamic, and he called for basically that to be investigated by the voters, let's say, to speak their mind and say if they really want this to happen to their city. And for their city to be overrun. And that's the case that's playing out across so many Western European cities. He just happens to be one voice of many across Europe who are saying, something's wrong here. We're losing control of our cities to people from other countries, other ideologies, who have a much different view of freedom and how a country and city should be run.
Well, and I look at this and I ask myself, why are all of these Muslims moving to Europe? Why is the Muslim population in Europe skyrocketing? What is going on here? And again, there's a bunch of different things. There's a political agenda. There's the Soros-funded movement of people, the migration. And then you'll hear this point, and I think to a certain level it's fair. A lot of these countries have been ravaged by war. Some wars that they didn't bring upon themselves, victims of war, refugees of war, you could say. I do think there's a level of that. However, there's something else going on when the Muslim nations like Saudi Arabia and Iran and others aren't opening their doors. They're not taking these people in. They're not taking migrants. They're not taking immigrants. They don't have open borders. But if you're a European nation, somehow you're blighted with this, and you have to lose your culture. You have to open your borders. I mean, what do you think the story here is? Why is it that Europe has to fall to Islam now and these migrants aren't going to other Muslim nations?
Well, of course, like you said, countries like Saudi Arabia are not taking them in. However, Saudi Arabia is spending massive amounts of money to build mosques and acquire land in European and other Western countries. So it's not like they don't have the resources to take these people in. Of course, it's been reported many times that there is a tent city out in the desert in Saudi Arabia where they could house something like 3 million or 300,000 migrants if they wanted to, that have air conditioning in the tents. So it is all a choice, of course, but people might want to look into.
And by the way, just because what you said sounds so crazy, the crew should pull this up. That's a real thing. There's literally like crazy tent city setup they have. Like you think you're at like a Burning Man deal, except it's actually like nice tents with air conditioning. So I just want to like, that's a real thing. So go on, Dan.
Yeah, I think that the number is 3 million, but if it's 300,000, that's still shocking as well. I don't want to misquote that number, but I believe that it's 3 million. I think if people want to understand what's going on here, they should look up the meaning of Hijrah, Hijrah. That is basically the command for Muslims to spread throughout the world, and it's part of the jihad, the struggle, and that is their mission. You know, to go to places where they might not want to live, like the Arctic Circle of Sweden, for instance, where some of them have been housed and put, and that's just part of the devotion to their faith and what they're supposed to be doing. And so that is what compels many of the devout Islamists, and then also, of course, many of them are just living on taxpayer money from European taxpayers. So in Sweden, one of the prevailing stories right now, and it's recurring, it's happening more and more across Swedish municipalities and towns and cities, where they've been laden with, some of them with up to 25% of their population now, is recently arrived migrants that are all on the dole. And these cities are basically saying, we're running out of money. We don't have any money. We're facing economic collapse. And I see these stories more and more often across Sweden. So basically they're financially imploding these cities by just overloading them with people who are not going to work and who do tend to have large families and who receive basically all of their support from the government. And that
I've known Alex for like more than 20 years. I've hung out with that guy. We've been hammered together so many times. That is the most misunderstood guy on the planet. He was right about all this Jeffrey Epstein
Party and Nigel Farage are trying to make the Brexit happen. Let's get into the Brexit on the other side of this break.
I've known Alex for like more than 20 years. I've hung out with that guy. We've been hammered together so many times. That is the most misunderstood guy on the planet. He was right about all this Jeffrey Epstein. That is a fact. Alex Jones called this years ago.
For years, Jones has been spreading conspiracy theories.
He may be America's best-known conspiracy theorist.
Alex Jones, the far-right conspiracy theorist,
radio host and conspiracy theorist Alex Jones.
Alex Jones supported President Trump, but also peddled and promoted sick conspiracy theories.
It's really hard for me to understand how anyone can be so sick in the head.
Alex Jones, my God, Mika, and just...
Yeah.
Conspiracy theorist Alex Jones.
Right-wing conspiracy theorist Alex Jones.
Conspiracy theorist Alex Jones.
Alex Jones has been behind several right-wing conspiracy theories.
Right-wing conspiracy theorist Alex Jones. Radio host and conspiracy theorist Alex Jones.
The captain of America's conspiracy theory mothership, Alex Jones.
Jones espouses a litany of conspiracy theories, although he thinks that term belittles his reporting. The government's poisoning the water.
Absolutely. I have all these other government documents, and government think tanks propose poisoning the water to dumb down the population, make them more easily manageable.
Oh dear, the fluoride didn't work on this one. He's fighting back against my takeover. Hurry, chemtrail him immediately. I've noticed what they attacked me with on mainstream news. Jones claims your cell phones are killing you. Jones claims there's chemicals in the water that are lowering your fertility and confusing your sexuality. Jones says there's black helicopters. Jones says there's a world government. Jones says the EU is unelected. It is. On and on and on. And everything we're saying is out in the open.
Kelly Prime's son Kyle was just 10 years old when he was diagnosed with kidney cancer in 2016. 5 months later, Kyle's friend and classmate Mason Ferrulli developed brain cancer. 2 more kids at the school were diagnosed this year. The moms believe the recent increase in cancer cases could be caused by radiation from radio frequency, or RF waves, coming from this cell tower located on the elementary school campus.
So think about how the LA Times and even Wired magazine will admit there are thousands of studies that prove that wireless radiation, as it's intensified in its strength the last 30 years, and how many places it's emanating from, and especially the microwave millimeter waves. Cell phones operate as microwave transmitters and transceivers. Now, what's a microwave do? It vibrates water, vibrates molecules. And 5G is an even more powerful form of microwave that even rattles it faster. That's what causes the heat, the friction of the molecules, and burns oxygen and carbon dioxide. You heard me right. 5 burns the atmosphere.
Epstein pleaded guilty to soliciting prostitution in Florida in 2008 as part of a controversial deal. In a civil case against the government about that deal, one accuser says she took part in an orgy on Epstein's private island in 2002 with approximately 8 other young girls who appeared to be under the age of 18. What may have happened here?
Just because some people want to restrict views doesn't mean they have a right to do it. And see, once that happens, now you can shut down the details of Bill Clinton's best buddy and the pedophile island that we've been exposing.
Prison guards working when Epstein apparently died by suicide may have falsified reports to make it look like they were checking in on Epstein when they were in fact not.
I am now more suspicious than ever that this could be a homicide.
People won't listen to me because I got too much data. And you imagine what this is like?
Alex Jones called this years ago. Years ago, he was saying that they take a lot of famous people to this island and they have all these young girls that this guy hooks them up with. He was talking about this years ago. Now it is mainstream news.
If you are receiving this transmission, you are the resistance.
Trigger warning. This broadcast contains subject matter that may offend liberal snowflakes. It's The War Room with Owen Shroyer. Watch the live stream at Infowars.com/show.
This is pretty funny, actually. A couple things going through my head, and then we'll get back to Dan Lyman. This is going crazy right now. Candace Owens, like all of these people get into a debate with her on Twitter, and then she says, hey, let's actually debate, for charity, and let's film it and everything, and then they bow out and they say, no, I'm not in this for entertainment, but these are literally entertainers like Jameel Hill. I mean, it's just, these people are such frauds, man, and they're just so weak-minded. It's just pathetic. That's just a distraction, though, that I just saw during the break. I also saw this morning, and I didn't want to cover it because I really don't know the context, but it appears to be, this comes out of Europe, it appears to be 2 Muslim ladies wearing the full hijab, either getting caught stealing at a department store or a grocery store, or they just got done stealing at a grocery store, and basically they're in their full hijab, and it's basically just a big thing for them to loot a bunch of bags of candy. Now, again, I don't know the context of this. This video was going viral this morning. I wasn't going to cover it until now. It's being censored on Twitter. So this video is being censored on Twitter. Now, again, I wasn't going to cover it because I couldn't find any context to put to it, other than it just appears like 2 Muslim ladies robbing putting all the candy in their hijab and then walking out with it because you can't see it because they're wearing a damn trash bag. But Twitter is now censoring that video. And so everyone that was posting it this morning is having it removed, and they're having to repost it because Twitter's censoring it. So what the hell is that? Yeah, the crew's pointing out how it's got over 50,000 views, but somehow less than 1,000 likes. Yeah. Give me a break. But that's the kind of stuff that's going on in Europe. That's why Europeans are getting sick of it. That's why the Brexit vote happened twice, but they still can't get the Brexit. So, Dan Lyman with us for another segment. Dan, Boris Johnson comes out and says he'd literally rather die than delay the Brexit another month. He doesn't want to spend another month in the EU.
Brexit, I have to be honest, the Brexit is one of the most confusing topics to stay on top of because there's so much minutia, so many ins and outs in the British, the governmental system there that it still baffles me the way that everything works. There has to be royal assent for this, and the House of Lords has to approve this, and then the Prime Minister this, and snap election that. So it can get very confusing. from what I understand right now, Boris Johnson is calling for a snap election, basically to solidify himself as the official prime minister, because obviously he wasn't quite elected to get in there with the ouster of Theresa May, her resignation, and he basically ascended through a nomination process. So if he can call a nationwide election prior to the October 31st deadline and win, then essentially he has the people's mandate, so to speak, to execute Brexit to the best of his abilities, and he has said that he would do it no deal or deal. So he has challenged Jeremy Corbyn to basically have this vote, and Jeremy Corbyn says no to the vote. So there is a lot of confusion as to what's going to happen. There's going to be another vote on Monday. I think Parliament is trying to vote to block any no-deal Brexit from going through, and they're also trying to delay Brexit again. So things are very complicated there. I do like what I'm seeing out of Boris because I am very skeptical of him. I don't trust him completely. However, him standing his ground as of right now, I think, is admirable, to say the least.
Yeah, certainly not. His politics aren't, perfect, I would say. Nobody's are, but he does, I believe, about this Brexit. So the Queen is set to speak on this. I believe it's on the 14th. I was having the crew look this up. I do believe it is the 14th when the Queen is going to give a speech, apparently in support of Brexit. So that would be an interesting thing to witness. But what are you hearing from Britain? What are you hearing coming out of people that will be involved in this vote? Because they've already voted twice. I mean, it's like, are they sick of voting at this point? Do they feel that even a vote won't help them?
I don't know. When I hear from just, let's say, mainstream Brits, mainstream Irish people who just read the mainstream news, the mainstream media is very effective at pushing propaganda that gets them all into, they latch onto their issue, whatever it may be. With the Irish, it's the backstop, the border with Northern Ireland, with the mainland. English folks on the Big Island there, they have their own issues. Project Fear, as it's known, getting people to be concerned about, whatever detail affects their life. There's some cat ladies because they think they won't have access to it, or people saying the supply chains will go down and they need to stock up on food and water. I mean, the whole thing is madness, and they have everybody whipped up into such a frenzy there. And then you look at countries like Norway, Iceland, Switzerland, not part of the EU, have no problem trading, doing business, getting the products that they need, selling the products that they need to sell. And so for anyone who buys into this and thinks that Britain is going to collapse because they're not in the EU, I mean, that's just madness. Let's just look at the other countries that are doing just fine without being in the EU.
So it'll be interesting to see if there is any, you have a vote, but is it really a vote? It's just a symbol of a vote. It's just a facade of a vote. There's no actual practical value of this vote. At least that's the way it's been for Brexit. All right, final topic here before Dan Lyman goes. Angela Merkel. Now, what is the current status of Merkel? Because I was hearing she was on her way out. There were hints she was on her way out. She's still in. Is she out? Is she in? What's the deal with Merkel right now?
Also, another very confusing situation because, of course,
Dan, you're supposed to have these answers for me.
Well, what the issue is
if I can't go to Dan Lyman, where can I go?
The issue is that there is so much information from both sides that when you see these people hanging in there, for instance, when everyone was sure that Macron was going to be ousted by the Gilets jaunes after months of protests, it looked like they were going to basically push him out, and it didn't happen. So there are forces behind the scenes that are pulling so hard to keep these people in power. It's so clear that Merkel seems to have some sort of health issue. She's had these trembling spells and doesn't look well. She barely formed her last government. It took months to form that government. Barely hanging on by a thread. Even as of today, Deutsche Welle, the state-run media, is running defense for her, saying that the majority of Germans want her to hang in there and stay to the end of her term. I don't know if that's the case. There is so much disinformation, but I do see the AfD is rising in Eastern Germany, and I do see that the Green Party is doing very well in Germany, and that's even the more. And so things are just moving at breakneck speed right now.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, Dan Lyman, Europe.infowars.com. He's got the finger to the pulse on all of these news stories, and that's where you can follow his work. Wow, I'm pumped, guys. Give me a doc cam. Look at this. I got to all the subjects. I got to every subject that I